Hello and welcome to this AVLAND review of the Denon AVR4520 home cinema receiver. We're going to talk to you about the different features of this home cinema receiver, its connections, setup menus. We're going to show you its Android control app and tell you what we think it sounds like and what it's like to use with things like that control app.
The 4520 from Denon is their sort of higher end AV receiver now. It's not quite their flagship. The AVC-A1 is still the top one, however it's a few years out of date. This one is 9.2 channels, and those 9 channels have 190 watts for each channel of amplification. It has HDMI version 1.4, and of that it has 7 HDMI inputs, one of which is on the front panel, which you can see here, which doubles up as an MHL connection. But it also has twin HDMI outputs for the main zone and a fourth, up to 4 zones, and the fourth zone is a HDMI zone. So you can run a HDMI cable off to another room and it will do the sound and picture to that room. It will also, interestingly, with that, pass through True HD or whatever you're using in it. So in theory, you could have another home cinema amplifier on the end of that HDMI cable and share, the high quality Blu-ray player or something that you've got attached to this receiver. It has Audyssey Multi-EQ XT32 room correction, and it's got an aluminium front panel, which you can see here. It comes in silver and in black. Yeah, it has a fairly unique feature in that it has network streaming, which has become fairly standard these days, but it has 4 connections on the back. It has a built-in switch, mini switch, so you can actually just run one Ethernet connection to the back of this, and from that Ethernet connection you can actually you can share it with other devices, so a Blu-ray player or something like that. The build quality is much improved on this. It's made in Japan, which the lower models aren't. And the back panel, you can see here the gold-plated connections, the better speaker terminals. You do get a real step up in quality from the lower receivers in the range, like the 3313. There you can see those 4 connections, network connections on the back. It also has a USB connection on the back and the front, which you can plug an iPod in, and it's got a 1 amp rated, so it'll charge things up as well. It has 2 coaxial digital inputs and 2 optical as well, and 1 Denon Link HD connection, which is to go with their new DBT3313 Blu-ray player, which we're going to show you in a bit. Lots of analog connections, an external 7.1 channel in, zone pre-outs, a huge selection of pre-outs. You can see there you've got a lot of different ones there for as well as the zones. The main zone you can have up to 11.2 channels there. Only powers 9, so you'd need to add a power amp if you were going to do that. HDMI cables, you can see there, you can see the HDMI outputs. You've got the 3 outputs there, one of them for the zone. And these are the different speaker terminals you've got. You've got front wide, front height, surround back, surround, center and front, and they're fully configurable in the menus. You can change them around and do various different things with those different speaker terminals depending on how you're going to use it. And we really do like the way that they've done that, and we'll show you that in a bit. It also has a turntable input, which not all amps now have now, so you can plug a record deck up to it, and trigger outs, infrared in and out for multi-room sort of custom installation purposes. Now these terminals at the back here you can bear wire with, but you can also, if you pull these bungs out, they can be a little bit tricky for them to pull out. You pull them out and you can actually use a bar plug. That is the best way. It's how we would recommend using it. The less likely to have any problems with it shorting out, and of course if you want to move it, if you want to dust your rack or you want to move house or something, much easier to set up again. You can see here when you bare wire, it's a lot more difficult, a lot more tricky, and it suddenly becomes a real clutter using all those connections. If you would use the full 9.1 setup, 9.2 setup rather, you would very quickly have a real jumble around the back of your receiver. Now this is the matching Blu-ray player, the DBT3313UD. And you see they look very similar. They've both got an aluminium front panel, both available in silver and black, so it's very good. But we're going to show you here the Denon Link, how you set it up. The actual sound is still carried down the HDMI cable. What the Denon Link HD does is actually sync the clocks of the 2 units to really minimise on jitter. So you hook the 2 up, and you then plug the Blu-ray player in as well using HDMI into the monitor out on the Blu-ray player, and Then the Denon Link HD light comes up on the 3313. You can see here we're playing an SACD. It transmits and locks the signal for DSD, and then the amp is actually doing the decoding part of that.
Now we're going to show you what's inside the AVR4520, its components, what the actual things are inside that make it work.
Here's inside. That's the main video board there going across the unit, that big green circuit board. And if we zoom in on that, you'll be able to see that the components they've used on here, they look more expensive and bigger components for us. I mean, it's a surface mount board, but then there's these much larger components on there that you don't see lower down the range, and is more akin to their sort of hi-fi products would have that sort of thing on there. We don't know exactly what they're for, which part of the output stages, maybe for the analog output stages, but they're it's unusual to see. And here also there's a separate, they've separated off what looks like the DAC onto a separate little daughter board that's on top of that main video board. I don't quite know why they've done that. Maybe it's to separate it off, to make it more separated, so there's less noise from all the video circuits perhaps. Here you can see the different power amplification modules. It's got 9 of them, and there's 5 on one side and 4 on the other. All bolted to that huge heat sink that helps dissipate the heat. Right in the middle, so it's nicely balanced weight-wise, is the transformer, which is quite large. You see there, that's the actual thing that powers all those different amplifications, everything in the amp as well, all its circuitry, all goes through that. And here on the other side is the other bank. These are the 4, so there's on one side the 5, and then here's it from the side. You can see each of these are the channels. That's the actual network card there, and switch on the right hand side, and these each one of these is the amplification modules. Now onto its setup menus. It overlays the setup menu over whatever it is you're watching, and it's quite it depends on what's coming through as to which menus you've got. So we can't actually show you them all because it depends whether you're getting a true HD signal or a DTS HD signal as to what menus you can access. You can independently set the subwoofer levels, which is useful if you're using the 2 subwoofer levels and they're not necessarily in the same place in the room. You can adjust the level of them, or if you've got different building characteristics to the room, you need to set that up separately. There's a tone control if you want to change the tone, although we generally recommend you shouldn't need to do that. If you've got good the right speaker balance, you shouldn't need to adjust that. You can adjust the audio delay if you're having some it's out of sync. Here's where you change the volume whether you want to display 0 to 98 or counter pin -dB. We recommend -dB. It doesn't default to that anymore, it used to. You can limit the volume as well, so people can't turn it up too loud. 0 dB is full volume. You can set what the volume comes on at. I would generally just have it to the last, what it's set to, and that's what it defaults to. And you can change the mute level so that it just brings the volume down a bit, but again, generally you want the mute to be mute. Here's the multi-EQ XT32 settings here. You can go in as well and manually adjust for each channel or all of the channels. There's like rather than using the tone controls, you can use this multi-band equalizer. So you can do it on a per speaker basis, or you can do it for all of them. Here's the video setup menu. It has some different picture adjust modes. I would turn this off. You don't want it messing around with the picture quality at all. You want it to be straight through, straight from your source. It has an auto lip sync feature as well. I don't know how well that works. It's not something we've had a problem with, so we haven't really been able to try it. You can choose whether you have the HDMI dual-ing or just one of them out. You can choose whether you have HDMI pass-through, so if when the unit's turned off, it will pass through the sound to your television. And here's the HDMI control settings. There's quite a few different things you can adjust with that. If you're having any kind of HDMI connectivity problems, we always recommend turning off HDMI control, leaving that off, because you can sometimes have some incompatibilities between different equipment. Here's the different scaling options, and you can choose whether you have it on the analog or just HDMI, or just turn the scaler off so it just passes through the signal. And you can choose what resolution, so you might want your HDMI to always just pass through what's coming through, but analog to always scale to a certain resolution. It's becoming less and less of an issue now because more and more things are HD, so you're just going to be passing through a HD signal to your HD set. Here you can change the zone outputs on the analog outputs. So not for the HDMI zone output, but for the other ones, the zones 2 and 3. This alters the on-screen display, and you can change the format to whether it's PAL or NTSC if you're in America or Japan. Then you've got different input settings. You can assign different inputs that are on the back to different devices. So you can have analog, the different analog connections, the Denon Link to Bluray, the coaxial, the optical can all be configured. They can also be renamed, so you might want to change it to PlayStation or your satellite box to Sky or something like that. The rotary dial on the front selects the inputs, and what you can do here is you can disable those so that they're hidden from showing you when you're spinning around. So if you've only got 3 inputs, why bother having auxiliary 1, auxiliary 2? You can just have them bypassed completely. It makes it easier for other people who are not familiar with the amp to use it, especially if they're not using the remote control. They can just spin to the input they want. You can change the video source per input as well, on the fly, if you want it to default to something else. This is the Audio C setup menu. This will go around and make a test tone through each speaker, determine the level. It will also determine whether it's wired correctly, and you can also get it to equalize the speaker as well, based on what the acoustic characteristics of the room are. We always manually set up our amplifiers. It's just how we like to do it. We know the room that it's in very well. Here's the amplifier. Now this is really neat. It's got a lot of different pre-configured things, so whether you can use it as 9.1 channel, 7.1 plus zone 2, whether you're going to have zones 2 and 3 in mono, or whether you're going to have them, you're going to use the extra amps to bi-amp. You can have 2 amps on your front speakers. There's a variety of different options there that cover most things, how you want them, and you can choose which amps do what, whether you're using a power amp or not. You can see there the pre means that it assumes you're going to have a power amp on those channels as you move that around. You can have it set to pre for all of them, and it turns off its internal amps as well. Custom is this other menu where you can just go in and say, look, I want the front channels. I want the front channels duplicated so that I bi-amp the front. I want to bi-amp my center speaker as well. You can do that. You can say, like, I want each output stage to be duplicated across those different terminals. So you can really drill it down to just how you want it. And we really like that. We wish that more home cinema amps had the ability to just freely assign each speaker connection to how you want. So if you want to bi-amp your rear channels and your front channels, you can do it. If you want to just turn off the amp altogether and you're not using it, you can do that as well. It makes it more flexible. Or there's those pre-assigned things in there as well. You can choose from those. In the speaker config, you say whether it's a small or a large speaker, or whether you're using it at all. If you're only using one subwoofer or not. You can bypass. If you're not using a center speaker, it will put that information through the front speakers. If you say that using small speakers, it puts more bass information through the subwoofer or subwoofers. Here's where you set the distances up. Again, if you're using the Odyssey, it works this out, or tries to, with its setup mic. But we prefer to just get a tape measure out and just do it manually. And the same is true of the levels as well. You can use a sound pressure meter. Some phones, you can do it with your phone now as well. Or just do it by ear. Just go through and try and get the levels all the same. And ultimately, it's your ears that are going to be listening to it. So, that's what we'd recommend. You can choose whether you want more bass going through the front speakers, you want the actual LFE going through the front speakers, as well as the sub, or just the sub. In most setups, that's how you'd have it. There's 3 choices here for the speaker impedance: 8 ohms, 6 ohms, and 4 ohms. Most speakers on the market are around 6, but look at what your speakers are. It's only really an issue with 4 ohm speakers. Otherwise, just set it to 6 or 8. Here's the networking menu, and here it tells you various different information, whether you're using a DHCP server or not. You can go in and change the name of the amplifier as well. This is what shows up on what's called net bias. When you do a search of your network, it will show up as a Denon AVR4520. I see no reason for changing that at all, other than maybe if you've got more than one of them in the house, and you're using more than one in one room. Other than that, it may not work properly with sort of third-party control applications for it. So You can change the language of the menus, setup menus. There's a few different options there for that. You've got different options for the zones, so you can adjust the bass, the treble, you can adjust the level of each speaker if they're not equally spaced in the room, or you can even say, look, it's mono, just put the signal through both of them. You can limit the volume, which is very useful if it's maybe in a room where you don't know who's going to be using that zone. You can limit that. Zone 3 has the same options. You can rename them, so you could say kitchen, bedroom. The main zone you could call living room or home cinema room. You can change it all. The quick selects, which is where you can have a variety of different things pre-programmed in to these quick select buttons. You can change that. You can have more than one of these devices. You can change the remote code setting for the remote control, so you could have two of them in the same room. Maybe if you've got it more than one of them in the house, but you want them centrally located and you just have the speaker cables running off to different rooms, you could do that so they don't interfere with each other, the remote codes. But generally I would say you're probably going to be then controlling it over the network rather than using the infrared. You can change the dimmer on the front display, and you can turn it off as well if you don't want it on, if you find it distracting, or just dim it right down. There's a set of channel indicators on the front that show which channels are in operation. You can have that set to either which speakers are on or what signal's coming into the amp. So for ProLogic 2, for example, it would show that it's 5.1, but if you have it to what's coming in, it would just show two speakers, because if it's a stereo signal, it'll just show the two coming in. It'll also tell you the signal information that's coming on the HDMI inputs and what the monitor is capable of doing, what signals it's capable of receiving from the receiver. It shows you all that in this bit of the setup menu, which is quite useful. And you can see what's going on in the different zones, whether they're powered up, what signal's being received, what audio signal, that sort of thing. Here is in the main zone. And then the other zones, you can see whether it's powered on or not, which source is being used in the different zones. And here also shows you what firmware the receiver has got, the latest version, and it will by default notify you if there's a new firmware update or not. And you can also lock the setup to stop anyone playing with any of these settings. Now this is the new feature that's on this receiver that for Denon anyway. It allows you to show various different thumbnails of the different inputs. Now it doesn't do it quite in real time. You can see the one in the bottom right there. Now behind we're showing a output from one of their Blu-ray players which has got Netflix on. So imagine you're watching something on Netflix. Here you can see what's coming through the other inputs. So you might be looking out for something maybe on if there's some sport going on, you could maybe if there's a football match, you could have that on there so you could see what was going on there. But it doesn't update very quickly. This is the networking section of the Denon, and there's a variety of different things on here. It has internet radio, and you can also add these to a favourite. You can see it starts up fairly quickly, and there's hundreds if not thousands of stations to choose from as well. Here in the UK it has all the BBC national stations and local stations as well, and also there's podcasts as well that you can listen to, so it isn't just live radio. Their service also allows for shows that have already been broadcast for you to listen again, and that's quite a useful feature that's on their networking portal. And you can save these to a favourite as well, so if you regularly swap between a few different stations, you save them to the favourites by pressing the option button on the remote control, and then you go to the favourite section here and they'll be saved in there. So we've put Radio 4 and Radio 2. It now comes with Spotify, but you need a premium account to actually use Spotify, so you have to pay for that with them. Now here's the networking settings. This uses DLNA, and depending on the DLNA server there's various different options you can do, but it will play FLAC, and now it also will do FLAC 192 and WAV 192 files, which previously the models down the range wouldn't do. They'd only do 96 kilohertz. This does now 192 24-bit FLAC, and it's pretty quick to start up. You can control it through the on-screen menus of the actual receiver, or you can do it from Denon's app. but we'll show you that in a bit. We'll show you their Android app, which is very similar to their Apple app as well. And here we go and show you, depending on your Denon A server, here is it playing some WAV files as well, just by browsing folders. Not all of them will let you do that though, so it depends heavily on what sort of, if you've got a NAS drive or if you're using a software on a computer, how that's configured as to the functionality you'll get. So this is the Android control app, and it's very similar looking to the Apple app. You can see that it's all sort of greyed out when the amp's turned off, and the light turns from red to green when you hit the power switch, as long as you've got the networking set to being on when it's in standby, otherwise you won't be able to turn it on. You can customize these buttons on the front here to what you want, so you can change them. So here we've changed to Spotify, but there can be any of the different inputs or different things that you see here. You can select and move those around. You can control Denon's Blu-ray player with it, but it doesn't directly control it. It does it through the HDMI control. So this app will only work through the amp, but maybe they'll update that so it will directly control it through the network connection. You can change the sound mode, so if you're multi-channel stereo or however different things you want to do. And then you can control the networking streaming features. So here we'll show you can navigate through to your Denon A server, browse the music you would do. So it's a little bit easier than doing it through its own menu. And very good, of course, if you're using this as effectively a Zone 2, 3 or 4 controller, because you don't need line of sight for the infrared. You can just use it over your Wi-Fi. Shows you the album art for each of the tracks, and it starts up fairly quickly, playing the different tracks or playlists or things like that you've got on there. The volume's down the bottom all the time. You can see the album art's not great. We don't know whether that's actually the way it's rendering it or whether it's just the way our Denon A server is serving it up, but it's there. The volume's at the bottom of each screen, and you can skip backwards and forwards. You can choose it to shuffle, or you can repeat the different tracks. And yeah, it's quick. It does the job. However, it's designed and rendered for a phone. It's not designed for a tablet, so they're not getting the maximum screen area out of it when you're using it with a tablet. They really need to bring out a second app or make the app know that it's on a tablet or a phone, and change and make it a little bit easier to use. This is the same with all the apps on the market. We have the problem with they're not getting the full potential out of the devices to be able to control them. They could do an awful lot more with these apps. You can browse WAV files as well. It's not just limited to FLAC or MP3, and it's quick. We like the speed of it. They've made a little bit of improvement to the last time we looked at this app as well. Now this is what you get inside the box. The remote control is backlit and also has a movement sensor, so when you pick it up it lights up, which is quite neat. So we found that if it's in a room that's got a lot of not very good floorboards that vibrates a lot, the light constantly comes on and off. It's maybe a little bit too sensitive. But yeah, it's got a little screen on it as well to show you which input you're on, which is quite a good little feature. You get batteries for the remote control. You get an FM aerial. There isn't an AM aerial in the receiver at all. And you get the Odyssey setup microphone, the power cable, and the instruction manual actually comes on a CD-ROM. Bizarrely, 2 CD-ROMs with different languages on. We're not quite sure why they can't fit PDFs onto one CD-ROM, but that's how it is. There's 2 discs in the box, and there's a quick setup guide as well. Now on to the pros and cons for the 4520. It's got very high level of sound quality compared to the model below. There's a notable improvement in the sound quality. We think it's a big improvement on the previous models from Denon, because there's a lot better sort of bass response, and the quality of the bass is much better, but keeping their traditional mid-range and treble, the detail that you're used to. In the past, maybe Denon amps are a little bit lacking in bass, especially for music, but not so with the AVR4520. It's a good sort of warm sound. We really do like it. It's one of our favourite ones at this price point. You've got to really step up quite a bit in money to get something better than the 4520. The configurability of the actual channels and zones we really love. We think that's brilliant and really useful, really helps you get the maximum out of this. If you did want to improve the sound quality for the front channels, for instance, and put a power amp on it, you can do that and then use the rest of the amps to do what you want. So you could use it to bi-amp your centre and rears. We really like that, or have lots of different zones powered. That's a really, really good feature of this receiver. And the Denon Link really does work. It really improves the sound quality between their Blu-ray player and this receiver. It's very much worth, if you're going to be using it for music, if you've got SACDs, or just even for films. So even with watching a film with True HD, it locks the clocks between the two units and sounds better. You know, it's a noticeable sound improvement between the two things. On the negative side, the app, the control app for it is basic in its functionality and badly laid out and not very well thought through. And we can't find it. We think it's been removed as a feature. We just don't know where it's gone. Previous Denon receivers for some years now and their network devices have had something called party mode. This doesn't have it on. Neither do any of the models below it. They've removed it. And that was a really, really good feature that was unique to Denon. None of the other manufacturers do it. That let you play the same music across your network in multiple rooms with multiple devices. So you could have 4 of these in the house and have them all playing the same music, synced, so it wasn't out of sync. We thought that was really clever. I think you can do the similar thing with AirPlay, but obviously that's, you know, you're tied into using an Apple device and that as a source. Whereas if you've got a NAS drive with all your music on, you can store far more music on that than you could ever do on a iOS device. So we'd like to see them reinstate that if they could with a firmware update. Would be brilliant. But very minimal on the negative side. That the sound quality is really where this excels, and it has got a lot of features as well. So it's very good. It's well put together, well made, and it does appear to have quite good components inside it.
That's the end of our review of the Denon AVR4520. We hope you've enjoyed watching it. If you'd like to see more reviews, or if you'd like to purchase this unit, please visit our website avland.co.uk. Thank you.